The desert wind carried the smell of iron, dust, and smoke as Taza returned to his people. He rode slowly, his stallion weary beneath him, every step echoing the exhaustion of a body pushed too far. The battle was over, the enemy scattered, but the victory felt hollow. His chest burned where a spear had grazed his ribs, and his arms ached from the weight of his bow and lance. Still, he did not complain. A warrior's pain was not meant to be spoken. It was meant to be swallowed, carried in silence like the stones of the mountains that shadowed their land. When he reached the edge of camp, children ran to greet him, their small hands tugging at his leggings, their voices shouting his name with pride. To them he was indestructible, the one who faced death so they might live another day. Women emerged from the lodges, eyes wide at the blood dried on his skin, the cuts across his face, the limp in his gait. Some whispered prayers of thanks. Others looked upon him as if he were more spirit than flesh. To all of them, he was a hero, but Taza did not feel like one. He dismounted with effort, patting the side of his horse in gratitude. The stallion's flanks trembled with exhaustion. Taza pressed his forehead to the animal's mane and whispered words of thanks in Apache, words meant for both the beast and the ancestors who guided them home. His people gathered, awaiting a speech of victory, but none came. Instead, Taza walked past them, past the fires, past the feasts already being prepared, until he reached the quiet of the riverbank dot there. With only the sound of rushing water, he allowed his body to fold. He sank to his knees and plunged his hands into the cold stream. Blood clouded the water, spreading like red smoke before dissolving into nothing. He stared at it, mesmerized. So much had been shed that day, his brothers, his enemies. And for what? The land remained the same, the sky unchanged. The sun would rise tomorrow whether or not he had survived. Honor, they told him. Glory, they sang. But Taza felt none of it. All he felt was the weight of expectation, of lives taken and saved, of the endless cycle of conflict that seemed to bind him tighter than any rope. He had learned to wield bow, spear, and blade before he had learned to laugh freely. He had been told from childhood that his destiny was to fight, to protect, to carry the burdens of his people. And he did, without hesitation, without falter. But tonight, as the river cooled his wounds, he wondered if there was more. He looked at his reflection in the water. The man staring back at him was young, yet his eyes carried years beyond his count. His braids were loose, his jaw clenched with unspoken grief. A scar from an old battle cut across his cheek, and now fresh wounds joined it, painting his face with the story of endless war. Was this all he would ever be? A weapon, sharpened and dulled, sharpened again until there was nothing left but steel? Behind him, the camp roared with celebration drums beating, voices singing, fires crackling. His people needed this. They needed to believe in the strength of their warriors, to believe that Taza's courage was proof they would endure. He gave them that gift, and for that he was proud. Yet in the hollow between heartbeats, when no one was watching, he let himself admit the truth. The victories left him emptier each time. He wanted something nameless, something beyond the blood and fire. A whisper stirred in him like a restless wind, a longing he could not silence. He had felt it before, fleetingly, when watching the horizon turn to flame at dusk, or when hearing a laugh that carried more life than any battle cry. He wanted more than duty, more than the endless test of strength. Something softer yet fiercer. Something he could not name, but his soul knew it waited for him. Somewhere just beyond reach. Taza closed his eyes, the river rushing cold against his wounds. He breathed deeply, willing the pain to remain inside, to be hidden from those who looked to him as unshakable stone. But beneath the mask, the cracks were spreading, and in those cracks, the possibility of something greater began to take root. The river was not only a place of healing for Taza, but also of watching. It was the one place in the valley where he could let his mask slip, where the roar of the current drowned the noise of memory. He had come here many times before, always alone, always seeking silence. But that night, as he sat with his wounds stinging in the cold water, he felt eyes upon him. He turned sharply, hand instinctively moving toward the knife at his belt. Shadows danced across the rocks, the glow of firelight from Camp faint in the distance. At first he saw no one. Then, from the bend where the river curved and the reeds grew thick, a figure emerged. A woman. Her steps were unhurried, as though she belonged to the river more than the earth. The moonlight caught strands of her hair, long and dark, falling like waves down her back. She wore no war paint, no feathers, no signs of ceremony, only a simple deerskin dress marked by stains of earth and water. Her hands carried a woven basket, filled not with food, but with herbs, roots, and strips of willow bark. Taza tensed. He knew her by sight, but not by word. Ayana. They called her the woman who often wandered away from camp, choosing the company of wind and stone over gossip and fire. Some said she was restless, that her spirit was too wild to be bound. Others said she carried visions, glimpses of truths hidden from ordinary eyes. Taza had never cared for camp whispers, but something about her always unsettled him. She walked like someone who feared nothing. "You bleed into the river," she said, her voice carrying easily over the current. "Do you not know the water remembers?" Taza frowned, unsure if she mocked him. "The water forgets as quickly as it takes," he answered low. Ayana crouched beside him, setting her basket on the stones. "No, the river carries everything away, yes, but it carries it somewhere. Nothing is ever lost." She reached into the water, cupping her hand, and let the stream run between her fingers. Not even pain, he studied her. Most would have approached him with reverence, with hushed words about honor or strength. She did not. She looked at him not as a warrior, not as the man who had fought and bled that day, but as though he were simply another soul by the water's edge. "What do you seek here?" he asked. Her eyes flicked to him, sharp as flint, then softened. "The same as you, quiet." She dipped a bundle of herbs into the river, wringing them slowly until their scent drifted up sharp, cleansing, almost sweet. And perhaps to remind a warrior that wounds are not shame. Before he could object, she reached for his arm. Taza stiffened, every instinct warning him to pull back, but her touch was firm, unafraid. She pressed the wet herbs to the cut along his shoulder, the sting immediate and hot. He hissed between his teeth. "It burns," he muttered. Ayana's lips curved, not quite a smile, but close. "Healing often does." For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the river's song. He watched her work, the steady way her fingers moved, the surety in her gestures. She was not timid, not hesitant. She handled his wounds the way one might handle a restless horse, calm, unyielding, without fear of being thrown. "You are bold," Taza said finally. "You mistake boldness for truth," she replied. "I see no reason to fear a man who bleeds like I do, who hurts like I do." "Do you?" Her question struck him deeper than the spear had earlier that day. He wanted to answer quickly, to dismiss her with a warrior's pride. Yet her gaze held him, and for once, words did not come. He realized then that she had pierced through the armor of silence he wore even among his people. The river rushed on, carrying blood, carrying whispers, carrying the weight of unspoken things. Taza felt a shift within himself, not large. Not yet, but enough to notice. For the first time in many seasons, he was not alone at the water's edge, and he did not mind. The river had grown quieter, as though it sensed the fragile stillness between them. Moonlight spilled across the current in silver ribbons, painting Ayana's face with a glow that unsettled Taza more than any enemy's blade. She finished binding the herbs against his wounds, her fingers warm and steady on his skin. He did not move away. For a long moment they said nothing. Only the soft rush of water and the far-off thrum of drums from the camp filled the night. Taza's people celebrated survival, yet he found himself caught here, tethered not by duty but by the pull of the woman beside him. "You look at me as though you expect me to vanish," Ayanna said. Her voice low-taza blinked, startled by her candor. "Many things vanish," he answered. Smoke, shadows, even men. Her eyes did not waver. "And what of desire? Does it vanish too?" The question struck him harder than the spear had earlier that day. He shifted, searching for words, but found none ready. Desire. The word felt dangerous on his tongue, like fire stolen from the gods. He had been raised to master his body, his mind, his temper, to let nothing rule him. And yet, with Ayanna so close, the discipline that had carried him through countless battles seemed thin, fragile. "You are bold with your tongue," he said finally, his voice rougher than intended. "And you are careful with yours," she countered, tilting her head. Perhaps too careful. Her words burned hotter than the herbs on his skin. Careful. Yes, he had lived his life within the lines drawn by duty, never stepping beyond. But desire had no lines. It had no rules, no shield. It threatened to undo him, and still he found himself leaning closer, unable to resist the pull. Ayanna studied him, her expression unreadable. Then, softly, almost as if confessing to the river rather than to him, she said, "Love frightens me more than war." The admission struck him silent. He had heard warriors scream their last breaths, had seen men boast of courage even as their lifeblood spilled into the sand. But this honesty, spoken so plainly, was sharper than any blade. "Why?" he asked, his voice a whisper. "Because war is familiar," she replied. "It comes and it goes. It wounds, yes, but it leaves scars we understand. Love," she paused, her gaze falling to the water. "Love is wild. It does not obey. It cannot be commanded. And when it leaves, if it leaves, it takes more than blood. It takes pieces you never get back." Her words sank into him, heavy and true. He knew battle, knew loss, knew the ache of carrying fallen brothers back to the earth. But he had never allowed himself to consider the wounds of love. Perhaps because, deep within, he knew she was right. Still, when he looked at her, at the curve of her jaw in the moonlight, at the quiet fire in her eyes, he felt something rising in him that no spear, no shield, no discipline could restrain. It was raw, dangerous, and undeniable. He leaned closer, his breath mingling with hers. His voice, when it came, was softer than he intended, almost a secret shared with the night itself. "It hurts," he whispered, "but I want more." Ayanna's lips parted, not in shock but in understanding. She did not draw back. Instead, she searched his face, as though weighing the truth of his words against the unspoken fears in her own heart. "You are reckless," she murmured. "Perhaps," he said, the faintest ghost of a smile tugging at his mouth. "But even a warrior can be reckless when the battle is worth it." Silent, stretched, charged, and fragile. The drums from the camp faded into the distance, swallowed by the river's endless song. For the first time in his life, Taza felt stripped of armor, laid bare not by an enemy's strike, but by a woman's gaze. Ayanna touched his cheek, lightly, as though testing the truth of him. Her hand lingered, and in her eyes he saw not fear, but something fiercer, a longing that matched his own. The river flowed on, carrying away blood, carrying away silence, carrying towards something unnamed, and in that moment, Taza knew, whatever pain love carried, he would not turn from it, not with her, at dawn. The camp was alive with smoke and laughter, the scent of roasted venison drifting over the lodges. Children played near the fires, warriors boasted of the wounds they had survived, and elders spoke of omens and dreams. Yet Taza felt apart from it all. His body ached, but it was not the ache of battle that unsettled him. It was the restless heat that Ayanna had sparked in him by the teeth and him by the river. She appeared as the sun broke free of the horizon, her shadow long against the earth. She did not linger with the other women who tended to the morning tasks. Instead, she walked straight toward him, her stride sure, her chin lifted. Taza felt the eyes of others on them. He knew whispers would rise about the warrior and the wanderer, about what had been seen at the river. Still, he did not move away when she stopped before him. "You healed?" she asked, her gaze flicking to his bound shoulder. "Enough," he said, her lips curved slightly, the way they did when she carried some thought she did not yet share. "Good," she said simply, and turned toward the open land beyond the camp. "Then ride with me," Taza frowned. "Where?" "Where the wind runs free," she answered. "Where you do not hide behind duty or war. Unless you fear such a place." The challenge was clear, as sharp as any blade. Around them, warriors exchanged glances. Some smirked, others shook their heads. Ayanna had always been unpredictable, but to call out Taza a man of battles, of scars, was something none expected. Tazia met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "I do not fear land or sky," he said. "Show me." Moments later, they rode. The desert stretched wide, endless, painted gold by the rising sun. Ayanna's horse surged ahead, her braids flying like banners, her laughter carrying back on the wind. Taza urged his stallion forward, his body remembering the rhythm of speed, the surge of freedom he had not felt since boyhood. The air was sharp in his lungs, the ground thundered beneath him. For once, there was no enemy, no watchful elder, no burden of survival. Only the chase. She led him through narrow canyons, across dry river beds, and up the ridges where the world opened into an ocean of earth and sky. He followed, not because he had to, but because something in her dared him to remember that he was not only warrior, but man. At last she slowed her horse on a plateau high above the valley. The camp below was a scattering of smoke and dots of color, distant and small. Here, the world felt unbound. The wind tugged at their clothes, wild and unrelenting. Ayanna dismounted, tying her horse loosely to a scrub tree. Taza followed, his muscles still burning from the ride. She stood at the edge of the ridge, arms outstretched as though greeting the sky. "This is where I come," she said, "when I want to remember that I am more than what others name me." Taza stepped closer. "And what do they name you?" She smiled faintly, her gaze on the horizon. "Restless, strange, untamed. Some whisper that I will never belong." Perhaps they are right. He studied her, the way the wind tangled her hair, the fire that burned in her eyes. Or perhaps they fear what they cannot bind. She turned to him then, her expression sharp, almost fierce. "And you, Taza? What are you? When you set down the shield, when you stop being only the warrior? Do you even know?" Her question struck deep, unsettling. He opened his mouth, then closed it. For so long his life had been defined by blade and blood. Who was he beyond that? The silence stretched, and for the first time, Taza felt the weight of his own uncertainty. Ayanna stepped closer, her voice low, almost a whisper carried by the wind. "Then let this be your test. Not of your strength, but of your spirit. If you can ride with me where no path is marked, if you can face yourself without the mask of duty, then perhaps—" Her words trailed, but the challenge hung in the air. Taza's heart pounded, not from the ride but from the truth of her demand. He had faced enemies with steel in their hands and fire in their eyes, but never had he faced the unknown within himself. He reached for her hand, calloused fingers brushing hers. "Then test me," he said. and I will not turn away." The wind howled between them, fierce and alive. Somewhere below, the camp sang of victory. But here, on the ridge with Ayanna, a different battle began, one not of blood, but of spirit. And Taza felt, for the first time, that it was a battle worth losing. The plateau gave way to rolling hills, where the grass grew higher than a man's knee and the wind carried the scent of rain from far-off storms. Taza and Ayanna rode side by side, their silence heavy but not uncomfortable. He felt her presence like the steady beat of a drum, guiding him forward. They came upon it suddenly, a flash of movement among the hills, a storm of muscle and fire contained in flesh. The mustang. Its coat was the color of copper struck by lightning, its mane black as storm clouds, its eyes burning with a wild defiance that no rope had ever broken. It moved with the kind of power that belonged to nothing but the earth itself, hooves pounding the ground like thunder, breath snorting in defiance of anything that dared to claim it. Ayanna's horse whinnied nervously, shifting beneath her. Taza's stallion stamped the ground, ears pinned, sensing the untamed force before them. "That one," Ayanna said, her voice carrying an edge of challenge, "has never been caught. Many have tried. All failed." Taza studied the mustang, watching the way it tossed its head, the way it turned its body sharply, never allowing a rider near. There was something in its gaze that struck him deeply, a refusal to yield, even to the hunger of its own kind. "You want me to tame it," Taza said, his voice flat. "I want you to see it," she corrected. Her eyes were on him, sharp as flint. "So many believe strength is conquest. They see a wild horse, and they think it must be broken to serve. But strength is also trust. Do you understand the difference?" Taza did not answer at once. In battle, he had always been the one to strike first, to seize before he was seized. To hesitate was death. Yet here, hesitation felt necessary. The mustang was no enemy. It was freedom embodied, and to try to master it with force would mean nothing but ruin. He dismounted, ignoring the protest in his wounded shoulder. Slowly, carefully, he stepped forward. The mustang turned, muscles tense, ears flicking, eyes locked on him. Each step Taza took was deliberate, steady, without threat. He could feel Ayanna's gaze on him, weighing his choices. When he was close enough to feel the hot gust of the mustang's breath, the animal reared, striking the air with sharp hooves. Taza did not flinch. He planted his feet in the earth, his chest rising and falling with calm breaths. "You are fire," he murmured in Apache, his voice soft, steady. "I will not take your fire from you." The mustang's ears twitched, its head lowering slightly, uncertain. It pawed the ground, nostrils flaring, then circled him in a wide arc. Taza did not reach out, did not grasp. He stood still, letting the horse come to him, letting the distance close not by force but by choice. Minutes passed, or perhaps hours, the moment stretched timeless. Finally, the mustang stepped closer, close enough that Taza felt the heat of its body. Its muzzle brushed his arm, tentative, cautious. Only then did he lift his hand, slow as sunrise, and rested gently against the animal's neck. The mustang trembled, but it did not pull away. Ayanna's voice broke the silence. "Now you understand." Taza turned his head slightly, his hand still on the mustang. "That trust is not won by chains? That love is the same," she said. Her gaze was steady, unyielding. "It cannot be taken. It must be offered." Her words struck him deeper than the horse's wild eyes. He thought of the way he had lived his life, commanding, conquering, enduring. Never asking, never waiting, always taking what survival demanded. And yet, with Ayanna, he felt something shift. He could not command her spirit, nor would he want to. She was like this mustang, wild, proud, untamed. To love her would mean to stand still, to wait, to be chosen. The mustang snorted. pulling away, galloping off into the hills once more. Taza watched it go, the thunder of its hooves echoing long after it disappeared from sight. He felt Ayanna step beside him, her presence warm against the wind's chill. She did not touch him, but her nearness was enough. "You see now," she said softly. He nodded, his jaw tight with something that was not pain, not quite fear, but something far more dangerous. "Yes, and it frightens me more than any battle." Ayanna's lips curved faintly, her eyes glinting with a light he could not name. "Then perhaps you are finally ready." The wind rushed around them, carrying the echo of hooves and the unspoken truth between them. For the first time, Taza understood that strength was not only the power to fight, but the courage to yield. By dusk, the horizon burned with the color of copper and blood. Storm clouds rolled low and heavy, their edges lit by flashes of lightning that clawed at the sky. The air was thick, swollen with the scent of rain and smoke. Taza and Ayanna had returned to the camp only briefly before the elders sent whispers through the lodges. Riders had been seen on the far ridge. Raiders, hungry for horses, weapons, and blood. Taza's body was not ready for another fight. Yet his people did not look at his wounds. They looked at his eyes, his name, his place among them. He would rise again, as he always did. Still, as he tightened the rawhide around his shoulder, he felt Ayanna's gaze on him, sharp with both fear and fire. "You should rest," she said. "There is no rest when danger comes." Taza replied, her jaw tightened. "And when will there be?" "You bleed and fight until nothing is left." "What will you give them when you are gone?" He paused, the words piercing deeper than the wound in his side. For a heartbeat, he almost told her what stirred in him, the truth that his spirit longed for more than endless war. But the shouts of alarm from the outer fires silenced him. The raiders were upon them. The attack came swift, a storm of hooves and war cries. Torches flew, striking the lodges, sending tongues of fire licking at the night. Women pulled children into the shadows while warriors mounted in haste. The scent of burning hides mixed with the sharp tang of steel and sweat. Taza's stallion reared beneath him as he charged into the fray. Every muscle screamed, every wound reopened, yet his focus was unshaken. He fought not for glory, not even for duty this time, but for the people behind him and for the woman whose eyes had just told him she feared losing him more than she feared the fire. He cut through two riders with the sweep of his lance, then twisted to block another's blade. Pain lit his ribs like fire, but he pressed on. Sparks rained from the burning lodges, and the ground shook with the thunder of hooves. A cry broke through the chaos. Ayanna. She had run toward the river, trying to lead children away from the flames, but a raider veered after her, torch in hand, eyes glinting with cruelty. Without thought, Taza spurred his horse forward, the world narrowing to that single moment. He collided with the raider, ripping him from his saddle. They tumbled to the earth in a clash of fists and steel. The man's knife tore across Taza's shoulder, reopening what little healing had begun. Hot blood soaked his side, but rage drove him forward. He slammed the raider's head against the stones until the body went still. Breath ragged, vision blurred, he staggered to his feet. Ayanna stood only a few paces away, children clinging to her legs, her face pale in the firelight. Her lips parted, but no words came. Taza swayed, barely upright, yet when he met her eyes, a fierce calm burned in his chest. The battle raged on around them, shouts, screams, the crackle of collapsing lodges, but in that moment, it was only them. Another raider charged, spear lowered. Taza had no time to mount, no strength to block. He braced himself, ready to take the blow if it meant shielding her. But as the rider drew close, Ayanna seized a burning branch from the ground and swung with a cry that split the night. The horse veered, the raider toppled, and flames leapt high, scattering sparks into the dark. Taza stared at her, stunned. She stood trembling, yet her grip did not falter. Her chest heaved, her eyes wild not with fear, but with a strength he had never seen so fiercely. For a heartbeat, the firelight framed her as something more than mortal, untamed, unbroken, as fierce as the mustang that had fled into the hills. The raiders fled soon after, beat and backed by the fury of warriors defending their home. Smoke clung to the valley, heavy and bitter, but the people endured. The fires were smothered, the wounded tended, the children soothed. Taz sat on the earth, blood seeping into the dust. His vision swam, but he felt a hand on his face, steady and warm. Ayana knelt before him, her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "You fool," she whispered. "You bleed as though you are endless." His lips curved, faint, broken but true. "And you," he rasped, "fight as though you are fire itself." She shook her head, pressing her forehead to his. "Sweetheart," she whispered, voice trembling, "you are stronger than a mustang, but you cannot bear every burden alone." Her words wrapped around him, softer than any battle cry, fiercer than any victory song. And for the first time, Taza let the weight slip from his shoulders, if only for that moment. The storm of fire and steel had passed, but its ashes clung to the valley. Smoke rose in thin columns from the charred frames of lodges. The air was thick with the scent of blood, sweat, and scorched earth. Children wept softly against their mothers' shoulders. Warriors limped, bearing wounds in silence, their eyes hollow with the knowledge of what had been taken and what had been spared. Taza lay beneath the pale light of dawn, his body bound with herbs and cloth, his strength stretched to its edge. Every breath sent fire through his ribs, every twitch reminded him of how close the blade had come. Yet none of that weighed on him as heavily as the sight of Ayana sitting by his side. She had refused to leave him, even when others called her to tend the wounded. Her eyes remained fixed on him, as if by watching she could keep him tethered to the earth. Her hand never strayed far from his, sometimes brushing against his fingers as though testing to see if he still lived. For a long while, neither spoke. Silence was its own language, thick with all that had happened. Finally, Taza's lips parted, rough and cracked. "You fought," he rasped, his voice little more than air. Her head turned, sharply, as if surprised he could speak. "Because I had to," she said. "Because you cannot always be the shield." His gaze lingered on her. The firelight of the night still seemed to cling to her features, the way she had stood, burning branch in hand, eyes fierce as lightning. He had seen warriors tremble, seen men falter, but she had not. She had been a storm wrapped in human form. "Sweetheart," he whispered, the word falling from him unbidden, raw with affection. "You are stronger than a mustang." Ayana's breath caught. For a moment her eyes glistened, though she quickly looked away, blinking hard. "Do not speak such things when you are bleeding," she murmured, her voice unsteady. "It makes me think you are saying goodbye." But Taza shook his head, weak though the gesture was. "Not goodbye, truth." She turned back to him, her expression torn between anger and tenderness. "Truth?" "Yes," he winced, shifting slightly against the earth. "All my life I thought strength was measured by how much I could endure, how much pain I could bear. But you showed me it is more. It is not only to carry, but to rise. To protect, but also to trust. To fight, but also to feel." Her lips parted, but no sound came. He reached weakly for her hand. She took it, clasping it tightly as though to anchor him. His thumb brushed her knuckles, each touch deliberate, heavy with meaning. "When I saw you in the fire, I knew. You were not a shadow, not a dream. You were the storm, the mustang, untamed, and I," his voice faltered, breath ragged, "I do not wish to tame you. I wish only to walk beside you." The tears she had held back broke free, sliding down her cheeks in silence. She bent closer, pressing her forehead to his. The world around them, the groans of the wounded, the crackle of dying embers faded until only their breaths remained. "You are a fool," she whispered, her voice trembling. "A stubborn, reckless fool." He managed the ghost of a smile. "Then let me be your fool." Her laugh broke through her tears, soft and shaky. She pressed his hand to her lips, eyes closing. "Do not make promises when your blood still warms the earth." But Taza only whispered, steady despite his weakness, "This is the only promise worth making." Ayana's breath hitched, her heart caught between fear and longing. She had always believed love was more dangerous than war, but now she understood it was dangerous because it was true, because it demanded surrender not of land or body, but of soul. And she realized, with her hand in his, that she was willing. The sky above them lightened as the storm clouds drifted, streaks of pink and gold breaking through. The camp stirred with weary life, but on the ground where warrior and wanderer lay, something new had been born. Not conquest. Not victory. Truth. Dawn crept over the valley in a soft haze of gold and rose. The fires from the night before had dwindled to smoke, and the camp stirred with cautious life. Children peered from behind mothers' skirts, warriors checked their weapons, and the elders offered prayers to the rising sun. But Taza and Ayana were not among them. They stood at the edge of the ridge, their horses restless beneath them. The land stretched wide and untamed, a sea of hills, river, and sky unbroken by human hand. Here there was no war, no raid, no expectation. Only the wind, the horses, and each other. Taza adjusted the rawhide binding on his shoulder, his wound still smarting, yet he felt a lightness he had not known for many moons. Pain had been his companion since childhood, and he had learned to carry it as armor. But now, with Ayana by his side, he understood that pain could coexist with something greater, something wild, free, and alive. Ayana's hand brushed his, warm and sure. "Do you always ride this early?" he asked, a trace of humor in his voice despite the night's ordeal. "Only when I need to remember that I exist, beyond the boundaries of fear," she replied. Her eyes glimmered with the dawn's light. "And you? Do you remember?" Taza's gaze swept across the valley below, where the camp lay nestled among the trees and river bends. The memory of fire, blood, and chaos lingered, yet it no longer felt like the only measure of life. He looked at Ayana, her silhouette against the morning sky, and realized that strength was no longer just about endurance or survival. It was about connection, trust, and the courage to face what the heart demanded. "I do," he said quietly, tightening his grip on the reins. "And I will not forget." For a moment, the world held its breath. Horses pawed at the earth, the wind whispered through the tall grass, and the valley seemed to wait with them. Then, without further word, Ayana spurred her horse forward, and Taza followed. The stallions thundered across the plains, hooves kicking up clouds of dust. The wind whipped through their hair, stung their faces, and carried the scent of grass, river, and earth. Taza leaned forward, riding not as a warrior but as a man who had learned something essential about life, that freedom was not given. It was shared. Ayana's laughter rang across the hills, bright and untamed. Taza mirrored it with a roar of exhilaration, and for the first time, he felt the full rhythm of his own heart, unguarded, unbroken. The Mustang from weeks past flashed across a distant ridge, its wild energy a reflection of the spirit he now carried within him. "You are reckless," Ayana called back, her voice carrying in the wind. "And you," Taza shouted, leaning close to match her pace, "are my recklessness made real." The ride carried them through narrow canyons, across riverbeds glittering in the sun, and up ridges that opened into vistas so wide they seemed infinite. With each stride of their horses, Taza felt his past battles, past losses, and past fears dissolve behind him. The blood he had shed, the pain he had carried, the deaths he had witnessed all were fragments of a life that had led him here, but they did not define him any more. At the peak of a hill, they slowed, letting their horses breathe, the valley unfolding like a living map below. Ayanna rested her hand on his arm, fingers tracing the lines of his strength, the evidence of his endurance. Taza looked into her eyes and saw not only wild fire but calm, not only courage but trust. "I thought I knew what strength was," he said softly. "But it is more than surviving the world. It is surviving yourself and choosing to stand with someone else anyway." Ayanna's lips curved, eyes gleaming. "Then ride with me," she said. "Not as a warrior, not as a survivor, but as a heart unchained." He smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes and softened the scars that had seemed permanent. "Always," he replied, and together they rode through the wind, across the ridges, into the expanse of a world no longer defined by battles won or lost, but by the freedom to feel, to trust, and to want more. It hurt, yes, but it was a pain tempered by exhilaration, by life, by choice. And they wanted it, more than they had ever wanted anything before. The horizon stretched endlessly, a promise unbroken, as Taza and Ayanna galloped into a day that belonged not to war, but to them.